Hi, I'm Kelly and I'm with Women for One, and I'm so excited today to have one of my dearest friends here, Dr. Heidi Zappone, to have a really authentic conversation about her life story and some lessons that she can share with our community. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
So I'm really excited about having Heidi here because first and foremost, she's one of my dearest friends. We have a very deep heart connection, and she has been part of my healing team for over 10 years now. And I take my healing team very seriously in my life, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Like I believe everyone should. And I only have the best of the best that work with me. I don't know what I would have done without her in times of my life. I met her about 10 years ago, and it was when I was going through my divorce, and she met me in a really dark place, and helped me kind of move out of that and step into my power in many ways. Heidi is a naturopath, a chiropractor, a doula, so she helps beings come into this world, and she's, as I've said before, she's a nutritionist. I've been fortunate enough also to have Heidi become a dear friend of mine that's also a travel partner. We've been to Bali together. It's just been an amazing ride as a friend with her. So what I want to do is I want to talk to you and start with the question around authenticity, because really Women for One is about defining what authenticity is personally for everyone. And I believe that there are many women in this world that have begun to understand what authenticity means and to actually ask the question themselves, what it means for themselves. So I wanted to know how you define it and who your models of authenticity are.
Well, you know, I heard Oprah Winfrey say this beautifully, and I think it ties into what I believe around authenticity. You and I went to see her in person, and she spoke about the thread, you know, that connects the dots of our lives, that sort of are that soul imprint of who we are here on earth. And it's interesting because when she spoke, I got it cognitively, you know, like I thought, that's a great way to put that. But you know what's interesting, I don't think we've even talked about this, is a couple weeks later, I got it cellularly. Like I was driving and I had this remembrance. I was trying to actually formulate in my mind, like, what's my thread, you know, because I know I do these things and I know I love them, but is that my thread? What is it? You know, what is that authentic me that shows up, you know? Is it just that I'm happy? Is it just that I'm of service to the world? What is it? And so she commented that it usually shows up at a very young age, that there's little pieces that when the puzzle fits together, it's a complete puzzle. It's not disconnected at all. And I noticed that what I remembered was that I began healing around the age of about 3. I was actually very, very young. And even, I don't know if I've told you this story, but when...
healing, you mean healing work. You began healing others.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And the way that I did that healing work is a little different than probably the conventional way we look at it in this part of the world, especially. Where I thought in my mind that I went to school and I got these skills, you know, and I read these textbooks and things like that, and I have, you know, knowledge around certain things, healing became a very different definition for me based on what I understood of myself even at a young age. So when I was 3 and there were kids in my little preschool classroom that got sent to the corner, and these were days when, you know, teachers would say, you know, you're a bad boy and you should be ashamed of yourself and things like that. I remember cellularly, like literally cellularly, when I remembered that, I remember this kind of like nausea kind of feeling. And I remembered standing with these kids in the corner all day long. And my mom would pick me up, and you know, people would. She would ask the staff, you know, how'd you do all day? And she said, well, she was in the corner all day. And my mom was like, well, that's weird, because she's, you know, she usually doesn't act out, that kind of thing. And sure enough, you know, they went to explain that we don't know why she does this, but whenever somebody gets in trouble, she stands in the corner. And I really got this understanding that 2 things happened for me there. One, I really understood how sensitive I was about how words and energy and things can affect the health of people, you know, and that I felt that I physically felt that in my body. And secondarily, without thinking and without, you know, having to create a reason for it, I just, you know, innately stood next to those people. Now, I didn't have skills to do much more than that, but what I did was, number one, let people know they're not alone, and secondarily, stood for a different truth, even though I may not have been able to articulate it at that point in my life. And so, you know, also what I recognized was my sensitivity, you know, from a young age all the way through adulthood, you know, was seen as a negative, really. You know, I was told a multitude of times, you're too sensitive, you know, you're going to need to toughen up, you're going to need to be able to be stronger in this world. And I did just that. I became a gymnast just like you.
Right.
And I, competed on broken bones, and I did all of these things to win and conquer and all these things. Had a lot of medals to show for it, but what I ended up with was really not being happy, And then the further 20 years of my life after that, more or less out of fatigue, began to just let that go. And that's where that authenticity began to show up for me. It was a matter of sinking back into that which I thought was really my Achilles heel turned out to be my greatest gift. And the more that I just trusted moving into that space, feeling what others feel, and then having the courage to just do and act on that little voice that told me to act, turned into healing work that I do today.
So you're really talking about the empathy that you felt for others, translated into experiencing authenticity for yourself. Is that what you're saying?
That, and then also trusting that voice. As a 3-year-old, walking into the corner made no sense. Right? But I did it anyway. And as an adult, when we get that voice to say, do that, but it doesn't make sense, we go, oh, I probably shouldn't do that. It doesn't really make sense logically, or what will my family think if I do that? What will my mother think if I'm standing in the corner all day? Will she be mad? We don't think that. We show up in this world with this incredible innate ability to tap into that, and we sort of unlearn it as we go. So I think the ability to recognize that and then have a little curiosity about what does that look for me, and then from that curiosity is the bridge to courage. The courage to just not think and do it, right?
Right. And so that kind of brings me to my next thought around intuition. So not how do you define intuition, because you pretty much just defined intuition, but what do you do to develop it personally? Because you're a very intuitive person.
Right.
How would you personally tell our community, to tap into that intuition, that inner knowing, that power inside yourself? That's
a really great question, because I've been asked that so many times over the years, and I think it starts with curiosity, because we act based on our truths, So oftentimes I'll hear women say, "But I'm not intuitive. I'm really not. That's really not my gift in this world."
Right.
But I would argue that virtually every person, I think every person has intuition. It's a matter of whether we can recognize it, and if our truth is held that we are not intuitive, then our mind seeks to support that truth, and that voice becomes quieted. So our truth then is that we don't hear it. It's not there. So what I try to do is pose the question, what if? What if I was intuitive? What would my life look like? And what would that voice sound like if I was? And what happens is there's a little crack that occurs there for people, that once that little opening happens, every once in a while it peeks through. And I have people come back into my office and say, I think I heard it. I think I know what that is. It's a breakthrough. It's an excitement. And then the next step from there is really to just, even on a small scale, to trust it. I met a dear friend of mine that, recently, just simply by driving down the street here, and I was driving, and I got this sense, turn left. So I turned left, and there was a for sale sign at this woman's house, and we became, friends for a multitude of years after that. And there wasn't anything to lose, so I turned left, and there's nothing there. It's a big deal. So I encourage people to do the little things first, and then see what happens from there.
It's so interesting you talk about that, because when we went on our trips, it was so wonderful to be with you, because we're both so aligned with trusting our intuition, and how we would just be open to the possibilities, where we'd be walking in a city on the other side of the world, and the two of us are walking along. We don't have some rigid plan. We're like, well, where do we go? Well, we're hearing to go here, and we're hearing to go here, and just to see where that takes you, and that
how
curiosity.
Extraordinary that trip turned out because of that.
Right, and not being attached to outcome.
Right.
But what I find with intuition, though, it's interesting. And I wanted to ask you about it, is the muscle around it, because I look at it a little differently than you. You have that curiosity, the crack. I look at it as the more you do it, the more you trust that inner voice, the larger the muscle becomes, and the more you trust, and the less the universe goes, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Absolutely,
as well.
Wholeheartedly agree, and I think it's, that's where the courage comes in. Is just because sometimes it does go against what seems logically the thing to do, the thing that's sort of conditioned for us, whatever that action might be. This ridiculous chandelier is an example of that. I bought this ridiculous chandelier with the understanding that I would have a place to put it. My husband about had a coronary, because he knows this about me, at this point. And it was sitting in my garage for no more than about 2 months. And sure enough, the space appeared,
Right.
So it's what's so lovely about this is that when you just do it, you just do it a few times and see what happens. And I've never been steered wrong, when I trust that voice, and I'm sure you haven't either. You know what that feels like, where you do it and there's that moment of, uh-oh, what did I just do? And then it opens up, it opens wide open. And the more that you practice that, the more that you exercise that muscle, that gap gets smaller and the voice gets louder. Have you noticed that? You know, it used to be just a whisper, and then now it's like, now you hear it. Now you just, there's no question about what that is.
Right, and when you don't follow it, there are bigger repercussions.
Right.
Because when you know better, like Maya Angelou says, you do better.
That's exactly right.
So in talking about this with your intuition, can you translate that into talking about health? Because I mean, I live on the east side, right by Seattle, near Bastyr University. Bastyr is the greatest naturopath. They train all the naturopaths all over the world. You're not a graduate from there, but the fact you live in California and I go to you is a real credit to you.
Yeah.
And your knowledge of women's health, specifically around women's health. So I loved how you've trained me to listen to my body, because you know I've always been a big believer of intuition, but really giving me the skill set to help me listen to what my body is saying from a holistic perspective, instead of just breaking the different pieces apart of each of your, you know, each symptom.
Right.
You look at it holistically and create a customized plan for women. And I love that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, Deepak Chopra actually put into words exactly what I've known for a lot of years, and I loved how simple he said this. In fact, I just heard him say this recently, and he said something to the effect of, we do not care for our bodies care for us. And I recognized how profound that statement was, because we, in this part of the world, you know, yes, it makes logical sense to care for our bodies, and yes, we feel better, and yes, you know, probably we're going to extend our lifetimes if we do that. You know, and even if you were to look at that, you know, more naturally or holistically, you would say, okay, you might argue the fact that, well, yes, you'll extend your life, but you'll extend your quality of life as well. But what Deepak was saying is that all of that's irrelevant. It really has more to do with your body is a physical reflection of everything that's internal. You know, so it's a manifestation of that which exists inside. And, you know, your body, your joy, your happiness, all of those things are vehicles for that soul, God, spirit, whatever it is to come forward. You know, so that's where my greatest joy lies in my practice, is teaching people about that, teaching people about how to look for that. Because it's a guide to your whole life. It's not about what vitamin to take or how to shift this and that, even though that's maybe a small part of it.
Or how to lose weight.
Or how to lose weight, which is extremely common. Absolutely. And it's, you know, that when you look at it that way, it's more about force. When you start to listen to what your body needs in this moment, a great yoga teacher will always say, you know, do what your body is ready to do in this moment. Not what you could do yesterday, not what's, you know, going to happen tomorrow, but right here in this moment.
Right. So that's how you feel about intuition, just getting in touch with it in the present moment and moving forward.
It's noticing the synchronicities about things too, and the serendipities of, you know, the expression of what's happening in your body. When there's restriction in certain areas, take a look outside of the rest of your life and find out where the rest of that restriction is. You know, and oftentimes, and I've noticed as well, if you shift something within the body, you'll notice that shift. Say there's a restricted area in the body and there's pain. If you shift that, oftentimes it will lead you to the next possibility in your life to actually shift whatever's restricted here. So that maybe a job opens up. Maybe there's a relationship that's you know, holds you bound and stuck and feeling trapped. That is the next opportunity for you to open. I mean, our job here is really just the expansion of our soul. You know, and our body is a vehicle for that. But most importantly, you know, we become the greatest expression of who we can be in this world right now.
That's beautiful, and I'm going to throw you a doozy. Are you ready?
Maybe.
I'm going to simplify it, because we have a lot of followers, and I'm trying to kind of channel the different people that are going to be watching this. And so we have a less than American following, more of a global following. So if you had to give three words of advice, or 3 different steps of advice for a woman that really is just sustaining her life right now, not a woman that's involved with evolving their soul and spirituality, but really just
getting
trying to survive, what would be the top 3 things that you would say for your health and your well-being and your spirit? What would you do?
I'm surprised that this is one of the answers that's coming out, but it's the first thing that's coming out. So I'm going with it. Yeah. It's to find a community. You know, it's aligned with what you do. It's the recognition that we're not alone, because I think survival is oftentimes isolation. You know, it's however it is that we're feeling in our body that's not the fullest expression of who we are, oftentimes, we live in that all by ourselves. We live in that, and we repeat the patterns because there's no way to shed light on it. There's just, it becomes all that we know.
What are a few things you can tell the women across the world that are just trying to sustain their health and their spirit and their emotions right now?
I love that you do that, Kel, because I think, it's so easy to get us trapped in our own backyard, and we, have the people around us that we have certain conversations with, and you and I have conversations about everything on the planet, really.
Right.
Knowing that there are parts of the world that don't even have these words for some of the things that we talk about. So I think, number one, what you're doing exactly now in terms of creating community and creating a forum for women to speak in a safe way, in a way that relates to every woman in the world. We are all mothers and daughters and wives, and just living our lives the way we live our lives. But I think community is so incredibly important. I think being able to reflect whatever it is that we're going through, the recognition that there's other people in the world that feel that. There are no new stressful thoughts. There's no new anything, really. It's just that it appears that way because we have our pocket of the world that doesn't maybe experience certain things at certain times. And I love that you bring that to light. So I think being able to, whether you're engaged, regularly, or whether you tap in via this incredible tool we have now, the internet, that allows us to communicate with people all over the world anytime we want, I think is an incredible tool. So however you find a community to be able to express and reflect your ideas and your struggles and all of the things that we go through as human beings, I think is important.
So community is one.
Community is a huge one.
And it just made me think of something, and I wanted to bring this up, but remember when we were in Bali and we were staying at the hotel, and we went and we got our massages like typical Western women.
Sure.
And we filled out the evaluation cards, and I wrote just a little less than perfect. Right. And that beautiful woman chased us down.
Oh, I remember that, yes.
And she chased me down in the hallway and looked at me and said, "Please change this. I have children at home. Please change this. I will lose my job." And I looked in her eyes and I thought, we're a community of women.
Yeah.
I'm some Western woman that's not conscious of what I'm doing right now. And I caught myself in that moment. Yeah. And I said, whatever you need, because we need to be there to support one another. And I was really impressed that she had a voice and the courage. That took a lot of courage for her to do. Oh. And I mean, speaking to community, it made me think of that day where she chased me down.
But wasn't it a reflection too that, a comment card like this in the United States is usually used for feedback, right? You don't get fired on the spot. You get plenty of chances generally, and you weren't harsh. It was just feedback. It was constructive feedback is all that I saw. It certainly wasn't unkind in any way.
Right.
But the understanding that the way that that's received in a different part of the world, I mean, you and I had no idea that this would be the loss of her job and the effect on her family in the way that it was. And yeah, that stayed with me for so long, her intense courage and fear in that moment.
And I think there's women all over the world, they're in that kind of fear.
Absolutely. And the love exchange that occurred because of her courage to step forward and reflect to you what this reality really was for her in that moment, and gave you an incredible opportunity as well.
And this is totally girlfriend to girlfriend, but speaking of courage and culture and cultural differences, I want to tell our community, we walked down the street one day and we walked into this beautiful man's house. And first of all, in Bali, every house is open. So if you're from the Western world, it's just unheard of to have all of the doors open everywhere. And Heidi and I, we walked into this man's house, he welcomed us in, and we were typical Westerners, saying, well, we're just gonna go find a real artist and buy real art from somewhere. And we walk into this man's house, he welcomes us with tea, he cleans his marble, he has us sit down, and we're sitting there and he says, would you like to see my art? And so Heidi and I are all excited and we're sitting there like, oh, we get to buy art from a real artist from Bali, and typical Westerners again. And we open up the books and we're like, well, which one should we get? And we're pointing to these different ones. What can we take home as a souvenir? And the thing we took home was much bigger than a souvenir. It was such a great lesson because I looked at the man, and he said, I said, can we purchase these? And he started, not angrily, didn't get defensive. He belly laughed at us. He laughed so hard because he was thinking, who are these women?
Why would you buy
Why
this?
would you buy this? This is my religion. This is my joy in life. This isn't my job.
This isn't for sale.
He proceeded to open up his other doors and show us what his business was in the other room, which was selling these beautiful offerings to different companies and people, and said, this is just for you to look at and enjoy and sit here and have presence. And anyways, it's just a cultural presence moment that I think is really valuable for people to learn about.
We were talking about community number one. It reminded me of something because every home in Bali is a community, right?
Yep.
All of the family is there. Everything is open. You know, the symbolism is that there's nothing closed off. Everything is wide open, and our journey there was incredible as well because we were supposed to be doing yoga that day, right? Weren't we on a yoga retreat? And we
didn't do
yoga. Didn't do yoga.
Okay.
Yeah. We just trusted our instinct about walking down the street, and we came to a sign, and what did we say? I feel like we should turn left. So we did. We again turned left, right? So we went up, and then what did we do? We paused at the front, and we were like curious, like standing in the doorway, just staring in, and of course his head pokes around, and there's where it goes, right? And what a beautiful, seamless, effortless journey that was. There was no questioning. There was no, we were going down a road that had no shops. I didn't think once about, are we safe? Should we not be down here? How come we're not doing yoga? None of that entered my mind at that moment because the energy that we were going with was far bigger.
It was trust.
It was complete trust around that.
And being in the moment. And that's what you're talking about with intuition because that's the only way you can tap in.
It is the only way.
Trusting
fully trust.
And being in the moment.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful.
Yeah,
that was fun to share.
Yeah, that was a great story. I'm glad that you dropped that in there.
Okay, so now I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of where you are in your life now. Are you starting a new project, or I know you've been having both practices where you help women with their health,
right?
In California and up in Seattle as well. And I know you're moving into a new project, and I'm really excited to share it. So, would you like to talk about it for a minute?
Sure. We're starting a company called Dari Alla Luce. It means to come to the light. And just like Women for One, this name and the name of the company showed up for me before I had any idea what that was. And I didn't quite understand how that aligned with what I was doing. And so I wrote it down one day, and I just got curious about what that was going to turn out for me. And the symbolism I now understand. Actually, just recently I understood where that came from for me. And from a healthcare parameter, really, it's interesting how I got it one day, that our healthcare system as it is right now is set up in such a way that we look to remove that which doesn't work, So if I had a person come in the room and they had a set of symptoms and, we were to imagine that's the darkness within them, and, or just even a better analogy, I've asked this of my patients, they come in the room and I tell them, and I'll ask you the same question, if you went into a dark room and you didn't like the dark, what would you do?
I turn the light.
Yeah. So I've never, pretty good. So in all of the years that I've asked that question, not once has somebody said to me, I'd remove the dark. I would start scooping the dark out.
Right.
But look at how we look at our healthcare system. We have something wrong and we remove it. We want to suppress it or remove it or do something to abolish it. Rather than, an example of this would be, in order to not get sick, you embellish the light, you embellish your immune system, you embellish what's working. How many times have you gone to a doctor and they've said, oh my gosh, look at your kidneys are working beautiful and your liver's working beautiful.
Break it all up.
Yeah, it all gets broken up. And so we focus on the wrong things, number one. We don't look at things holistically. So Dari Alla Luce is really, it's an organic skincare line that will be coming out. We'll talk about that in a moment, but it really has a lot to do around education and how we look at our healthcare system, how we look at our selves, our beautiful, expressive selves, both from our own light and also in the light of health. So my hope is to change perspective, that people start looking a little bit towards the light and embellishing that which already exists perfectly within the body. The body is innately designed to be healthy and beautiful in all of its unique ways. And I think it's time that we need to stop suppressing that. It's time to move into a different place in our life. So the skincare line was born, and this is a bizarre thing because if you'd asked me 5 years ago, are you going to design a skincare line? There's not a day in the world I would have said yes. I'm not a sell lotions and potions kind of girl. But one thing I did notice is particular to women, that the skin is an extremely absorptive organ. And when I work particularly with women, around the issues of hormones and health and wellness, that when I test the hormones occasionally, they can be so off, and the things that a woman is doing in their life makes no sense. So what we put in our mouths is actually less absorptive most of the time than what we put on our skin. And the average woman absorbs over 5 pounds of cosmetic chemicals alone every single year from their face alone. That's not including body or hair or anything else. So it's really about education. I mean, I know there's a lot of organic skincare lines out there, but really what it is a commitment to providing the healthiest and purest product and education in order to go with that. The other thing that I wanted to touch on that's really about education around this is that the cosmetic industry is not regulated. You can put virtually any chemical in a skincare product and not actually even label it. So oftentimes people think that they're putting something healthy on their skin when in fact there's really, the FDA actually allows the cosmetic industry to regulate themselves, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Well, and it made me think of it because you were testing my hormones.
Right.
And I always make something about me in an interview, so I might as well go there. And you didn't understand why my levels were so high. And then you were like, Kelly, what are you using on your face? And I told you a specific product, which I'm not going to talk about right now. And you were like, do you know what is it in there? It's estrogen, or do you know how much estrogen is in that product? No wonder your hormones are off the chart. And it just, I had no idea. I had no idea because they don't have to. They don't have to say anything. And I mean, you know these things. And so we got my hormones balanced. But it's amazing that we don't even know that. And
well, and it brings us back to authenticity again. You know, it's just a commitment no matter what I do to service. It really doesn't matter how you show up in the world. That's just one little avenue, but really creating a product that's authentic to what it says it is. You know, confident that whether it works for people or not, there's many choices, but at least I know that all I can do is be clear about what it is that I put out into the world, and the ripple that I create is a healthy and balancing and, you know, loving one. That's what I can, you know, control, and hopefully that will inspire others to do the same.
You've helped me shift and embrace my body for what it is, and I think that's a big issue in this country and in this world.
Huge.
Everywhere you go, the female body, especially the prepubescent body, is put on a pedestal. And, you know, to be proud of being a mother and loving your body, and it's not about not having weight on you. It has nothing to do with your health, and you've taught me that.
If you look back to the most ancient forms of medicine, there are different body types, you know, and it's probably well oversimplified. There are not just 3 body types in the world, but that's just one example. If you look back to Ayurvedic medicine, which is, you know, thousands of years old, there was a recognition way back when that certain body types do better with certain things. There are blood types that do better with certain foods. And so to squish everybody, you know, into this parameter that you must be this weight and this, you know, BMI and this % body fat and whatever does not work. It doesn't work for anybody. We are unique. That's an attempt really to fit the human body and the exponential expression of who we are into this really linear form that becomes sort of a protocol, right? You are, and disease works that way too. So you are overweight or you have a disease, and therefore we take these linear steps in order to do that. But there'll be a multitude of people that miss the boat on that. And not only are they less healthy because of it, they're less spiritually healthy because of how they feel about themselves. So, you know, for me, you know, again, I'm going to come back to Oprah on this one, because you've got a woman here who has
every possible resource in the world.
Anything.
Right.
And what has she struggled with? Her weight, right? And what's the beauty of that? I sat back one day and I thought, I get it. Her purpose in the world is to share who she is with the world. And do you think that if she was this perfectly little twiggy blonde, that she would reach the audience that she reaches? Not in a million years, because you have this woman who's, you know, virtually untouchable, and now a woman like you and I that can look at her and say, I get it. She has an Achilles heel too. There's things that she struggles with in this world, and there are, you know, the fact that she's embraced that beautiful curvy body of hers allows her to stand on that stage with power and presence exactly the way she does.
We could just talk forever, but I do want to ask you the last question I always ask everyone. What are 3 words or one piece of advice that you could share with our community? Even a quote. But I ask everybody, and it's so beautiful to hear what people say, because they're all so different.
You know, I would say if you can, shift back to that childlike curiosity that we had. You know, the curiosity breaks our truth. It just shakes things up a little bit so that a possibility is there. Our purpose here is to grow and expand and to express who we are. And the moment we hold something as a rigid truth, that growth goes away. So that curiosity of a child, you know, the kid that runs into the ocean and doesn't feel cold, they don't feel cold. We hold the truth of cold, you know, so that's number one, embracing that curiosity. And I think secondarily, bridging from that, is the openness to a shift in perspective, because that's where our growth comes from. And that's where, you know, no matter what it is, whether it's somebody that is or not open to intuition, whatever it happens to be, that potential for moving forward and bigger and more expansive in the world exists when we, number one, have curiosity, and number two, are willing to just let go of the rigidity in order to embrace what could be just a little shift in possibility. And from there, you know, it's individual. Each woman, each person has their own carved path that's unique and becomes their unique expression of who they are.
That's beautiful.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you for coming.
And in your life.
Oh, me too. Thank you. Thank you very much.